Hello and welcome back to the latest episode of the Leaders and Strategy podcast. I'm your host, Mike Harris, and today I'm joined by a very special guest, Lucy Barkas, author, coach, consultant, and podcaster in her own right with the Say It Sister podcast, and I would say expert on all things leadership. So thanks for joining us here today.
You're very welcome.
It's great to see you. So we just talked about the book, and obviously through the book we've learned a little bit about yourself. But I thought it'd be nice to ask you some questions about you and your thinking about leadership and strategy and that kind of stuff. So I just wondered what your definition of leadership is, because I think you may have a different definition to mine. Look at it a bit differently.
So to me, a leader is somebody who has followers, essentially, and they are genuinely wholehearted following. They believe, they are aligned, they're following the leader's goal, vision, objective. Because if you are having to force people, push them, cajole them, punish them to come on the journey with you, you're actually a director, you're not a leader. And so essentially that's what it is.
Yeah.
Very simple. It's about, do you actually have people willingly following you towards your goal?
Interesting. So mine is a bit different. I mean, in that I think leadership is about how you influence people around you to do things without actually having to tell them directly what needs to be done. And the reason I think that is, and I'm a great believer in this, that you have leaders at every single level of an organisation. You can have a first-year apprentice in a business who is actually a great leader in that business. So therefore, they don't necessarily have a follower in that sense. But if you're talking about business leaders, I think you're right. But I think...
I challenge that, because you might be somebody who is... operating quite lowly, but you are responsible for your piece of work or your area, but you still have other people that you need to help you, support you, do that piece of work or do that a bit quicker. And so again, if they can understand why you need it done, what's in it, you enthuse them and motivate them, then they will again wholeheartedly want to do it.
I guess in the sense that they're prepared to do it, they're following, aren't they? They're taking their lead. So if they're taking the lead, then I guess it's a different context of what we mean by follow. Because the general definition of a leader and a follower, and again, it's one of the things I like about what you say and what you do, is you do turn it on its head a bit and come at it in a different way, which I think is great, because I think most people think of leaders as being at the top and people following being within the organisation. And that's, quite often the people at the top aren't the leaders.
Absolutely.
It's everywhere. And the people who are really doing the leading and influencing and...
if you are, like I say, the leader by title, you've got it in there. You might not, as you say, be an actual leader.
Exactly.
So if you want to invoke some change, you need to be really astute in finding out who are the actual leaders.
Exactly right, yeah. I think we've already discussed this, but I'm going to ask you anyway. Is there any personal experiences that have really shaped your approach to leadership?
So my dad was, he'd worked his way up in the automotive industry. And he got a formal education, I guess. He did his master's when he was in his 30s, so when I was a young girl. And he would start talking to me about different forms of leadership. And we would talk about political ones, we'd talk about men, women, historic. And so I think he gave me these skills to open up this world to me very early on. And then and he showed me the factory and talked to me how it worked. And so I think it was always there within me. And then when I got made head girl at 16, I just couldn't understand it. So I actually went to the teacher and said, why me? And they said, because you've got this ability to connect and talk to anybody, make friends with everybody. There's no prejudice there. So I started to put all of these pieces together. But I think it really became quite solid when I had an amazing leader myself when I approached around 30. And he was the most generous and kind, wise leader. And he believed in me. And so I just took, I had two amazing male role models in my life who really helped me to develop my own personal style of leadership. So I think genuinely it's always been within me.
Yeah. We talked before we came onto the podcast about coaching and the role of the coach, and maybe our different approaches to coaching, and the fact that maybe, and I shouldn't say this really, but I'm probably, in the context of the true definition of a coach, I'm probably not that good a coach really. Do you want to just talk a little bit about what you do in coaching and how you go about it and what you bring?
Yeah, so I am a certified trained coach, and I did my very first coaching course when I was probably about 22, 23, and they sent me, my employer sent me on this Coaching for Performance, which is an amazing book, and the practice came out. So my whole life has been or my leadership has been around coaching. And then when I was about 28, I was put on a leadership course where I got assigned a coach, and then I understand what true coaching actually was, because this person was they'd been a business leader themselves. They understood what leadership was, the tools and the models. But when we came together as a coach, he had never been a leader at this time in that company with my skills. So he absolutely understood that I was the one who had all the answers. I was the one with my own blocks and my own challenges and my own fears and my own strengths. And he helped me unlock my full potential and see things in a different way. So that's when I then became a coach myself. I went and did all of the qualifications. That said, when I'm working with my coaching clients, I always lead with the coaching philosophy, but sometimes they actually need mentoring.
Yeah.
And I always ask permission before I say, do you want a different perspective, or can I give you some insight from another client, for example? And I always ask that. And if they want it, I will share it. Yeah. However, if they reject it, totally up to them. I'm not attached to it as such. And the reason why I never give advice is because all I'm doing is dressing up thinking. Advice comes from a form of judgment, like I know better than you about your life, your role. So what I might do is say, here's a tool, but if they reject the advice or the tool, that's entirely up to them.
Yeah. And circumstances are different anyway. Yeah. So just because something's worked in the past doesn't mean it will work again. And also just because it didn't work in the past doesn't mean it won't.
Might work now.
It might work now. Yeah. So I hate the phrase when people go, well, we've always done it that way, or that's how we do it around here. And if you're not careful, that's what you're actually bringing when you're advising people, is just really telling them how you. Yeah,
you're just recycling history. Exactly. But we want a future.
Which kind of brings me on to the next thing that I think is fascinating, which is we had an email exchange before we came on, and you actually bring to the thought process of leadership almost this view of, I'm going to do things differently. I'm going to look at it in a different context. It may have worked in the past. It may work again, but you're going to bring your sort of thinking, a fresh approach. Do you want to just talk a little bit about that, and why do you think that you think that way?
Yeah, so I've always been this way, that if somebody almost tells me I can't do something, I then say, I'll show you, and I can. Yeah. So I've always had this almost rebellious streak. I've also had this this part of me, this projector, where I almost can see the big picture, and I can see all these dots, and then I'm like, well, that's not working. And so I just like, well, let's just fix it, or let's just change it. And I always say to businesses, unless it's a law or a legislation, everything you do in your business is make believe. You've just made up these rules, so you can just change them. Like, nothing's going to happen. And so I challenge people, because that's the way I've gone through it. If I don't like something, let's shift it, or learn from it, or change it. But then when last year I got diagnosed with ADHD, and everything made sense. Why I'm a risk taker, why I think differently, why I get really excited about new things and get hyper focused, and then once it's embedded, I get bored and I move on. But I think when you invite people with neurodiversity, in fact any kind of diversity, into your organisation, it's almost like you've got this magic key to get different perspectives and ideas and ways of thinking. And, you know, it's like opening up this jewelry box and you see all this like glistening stuff. You can see it all, you can take it all. Whereas if you just stick to the same kind of thinking, the same kind of people all the time, you're never going to get these rich jewels. So my newly found neurodiversity has got a lot to answer to. But equally, the amount of people in leadership or entrepreneurial businesses who have got ADHD is phenomenal. So maybe we're here to change the world.
Maybe. I mean, I just thought I just had a kind of rock and roll philosophy to life, which is about challenging and doing it something differently. So, yeah, maybe I should go and have a check on myself, really.
Cause, it's liberating.
Yeah, because to be perfectly honest, I'm the same. I'm always asking, why do you do it that way? Have you thought about doing it somewhere differently? And there's a bit of me that likes just playing devil's advocate to challenge and often there's really good reason for it, and therefore you don't want to change it. But equally, quite often it's just because that's the way it's always been done.
You got to kick it around a bit to figure it out.
And you know, just because that's the way you've always done it. If you want to improve, you're not going to improve hugely if all you do is what you've done previously. So. But I found that fascinating that you've actually been able to discover maybe why you are and how you think and.
But honestly, when I was in my mid-20s, and I again couldn't reconcile this, but at one stage, this newly formed analytical team who are very, very conscientious and quiet said that at some days I could be like a Tasmanian devil, whirling in with a great idea and then whirling out the other way with destruction everywhere. And so that's part of my leadership journey, equally in understanding the impact that I can have on others.
Yeah, absolutely. You've definitely got to be aware of. I mean, you talked earlier about fun and making it fun, and he was a guest on a previous podcast, but somebody I know very well, Tom. I think I might have mentioned him a bit earlier. He worked for me. He's worked for me on and off for 15 years, and we're doing sort of gone into a new business, and we're talking about the new business plan, and I'm talking about how we've got to make it exciting, and it's going to be exciting, and he pipes up and goes, "But Mike, it's always exciting with you. The question is it going to be fun?" And it really made me sit back and think, actually, it's a really good point, because just because it's exciting doesn't necessarily mean, and I might think it's fun, but is everybody else going to?
You might just be giving loads of stress and pressure, being that devil going in.
So it is actually really important to get other people's perspective on it, but the making it fun, I think, is absolutely critical, because if you're not enjoying it, ultimately, if you're not enjoying it, what's the point?
And one really good question to ask is, rather than saying, how can we make things more fun around here? Ask, what's not fun around here? So flipping it, because honestly, people like to moan and whinge about all the things that aren't fun, and tackle those first, eliminate those, and suddenly it gets a lot more fun.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. If you don't have to do the things you don't enjoy. I mean, well, I've been lucky, because when I started Strategist, I decided I was only going to focus on things I enjoy doing and not do. It's not quite worked out perfectly that way, but by and large, the things I do now are the things I enjoy doing, and therefore, I've basically done what you've said. I've eliminated the things that weren't fun, and it makes things more interesting. It's called the Leaders in Strategy podcast. So we try to balance leadership and the importance of strategy. So from your point of view, how important do you think strategy has to play in leadership and being a leader? You
can't do one without the other. They're absolutely intertwined, because again, when I talk about a leader, the whole point of whoever the leader is they have a vision of something, a goal, a target, something that they want to achieve that doesn't exist right now. And to get from where they are now to what they want to achieve, there's a gap. And the only way you're going to fill that gap is to have a strategy. Now, some people say you've got to have a plan. And there is a difference between a strategy and a plan. So the strategy is looking at all of the different routes and options and possibilities, and being able to flex in, we are in a VUCA world where things will change. People will leave jobs. People will go off and have babies. There will be a war and force the oil prices up, etc. So if you only have one plan and you say we take step A, B, C, D, you get completely derailed when your plan doesn't happen. Whereas if you have a strategy, you're like, okay, this has happened. Let's just switch the degrees one and keep on heading in that direction. And so having the strategy and the leader are intertwined. I would not follow anybody into battle if they didn't have a strategy.
Yeah, absolutely. I had a boss that actually stayed with me this phrase, but he would say your strategy very rarely should change.
Yes.
But your tactics could change almost on a daily basis. So in
Absolutely.
other words, how you deliver the strategy, you've got to work with what's going on around you and as you say, flex around that. But your aim of where you're trying to get to and what you're trying to achieve and things like your values, which I think all fit within that sort of vision.
It's like the North Star where you're heading.
Exactly.
Unfortunately, it's one of the skill sets which I see really lacking out there in the world. There are not many strategic leaders. There are not many wise leaders. And the reason why I say that is a lot of the groups that I work with that will say, oh yeah, we fundamentally know we need to change X, Y, Z, because that, we turn that lever and that's going to be the output. But we're just so busy and we've got to get this done and da-da-da-da. And you're like, unless you can raise your head up and stop thinking tactical, reactive, mini plans, you're never going to get to where you want to go to. Yeah. And that it's a fundamental.
And for me, how do you expect people to follow you if you don't know where you're going?
Absolutely.
Why would they? Why, we wouldn't, would we?
Yeah.
No, so why do we expect others to? So we talked about the changing world and maybe some of the challenges that are there. But if you looked at it from a business point of view, what have you seen as being common challenges that leaders have to deal with?
Changing wants and needs of employees, whether that is, they want better relationships, they want employee welfare, they want their health and well-being to be there, they want to be paid fairly, all of those kind of things. That's one thing. I would also say that just the economic market, it is really challenging. Everything is going up. The costs are there. The markets are uncertain. So you've got these two elements to weigh up. And it is incredibly competitive.
Yeah. And
you also have 5 generations all working in unison who all want different needs about how they want to work, flexi time, working from home remotely, and then the others come back to the office. So we're just in this really strange shifting time where actually you need your followers, you need your people, you need your teams, but what they want is often very different to what the board wants, the shareholders want.
And even within the team, they may want quite different things.
Spot on. Yeah. And unfortunately, when the world does feel unsafe, which it does for a lot of people, and a lot of people are struggling, people want more control.
Yeah.
And so then they make more demands. They want, they go to their employees demanding things. And so we've just got a lot of people doing a lot of demanding, a lot of wanting, but not a lot of listening at the moment.
Yeah. As a boss said to me, we were given 2 of those and 1 of those for a reason. So
and this is when the bosses and the managers, the leaders are stressed, they are not listening.
No,
they are
not.
Not being their best selves.
And they tend to go into command and control, the phrase you used earlier.
Yeah.
Because I think it's I was going to say easier. I don't know if it's easier, but it's more comfortable if you're in command and control.
And short term, it gets results.
It can do, yeah.
Long term, it destroys. But
and sometimes it actually short term takes you in the wrong direction as well. So it's not always the fix. But
I always use the analogy of the emperor's new clothes. And when you've got command and control style, nobody's going to tell you if you walk out there completely exposed. Whereas if you can just, even in the moment, just have your people around you just say, have you got my back?
Yeah.
Are we all right? Is there anything I need to know? They will support you. You won't make those exposing issues.
Excellent. Okay, so I've put the spotlight on you. I'm going to give you the opportunity to see if there's anything you want to ask me and turn the tables.
Yeah, so what I would really like to know is some of these quick fire questions, almost like these icebreakers. But I'd really like to know almost, why strategy for you? What's your fascination in your area of interest? Okay,
so that came about. I'd done so my background is essentially project management, and I was in a construction company, and every project got bigger, more difficult, and more challenging, and I loved all of that. And I did a project up in Edinburgh, which was a very big hospital build. And then, so I wanted to move on and do something different after that. And I wanted to go on to the board of the company I was working for at the time. And they said, no, we'd like you to do another hospital, this time in Birmingham, hence why I live down here now. And they said to me, it's twice as big and almost half the time. So there's plenty of challenge. And I just thought the one I'd done was hard enough. And now I've got one twice the size, twice as fast. But I looked at it and I thought, but I've been there, done that. You know, okay, it's a bigger version, but I've already done it. And I went back and I said, I want to go onto the board. I want to do something different. And they effectively said to me, you're not ready, because whilst you're a really good manager, we don't think you've got the skills to be a leader. Not that you're not ready to be a leader. We don't think you've got the skills to be a leader. So I took that away and I thought, okay, if I'm going to do this, and it's a 5-year duration, I'm going to learn about leadership. I'm gonna prove them wrong, that I'm going to be a fantastic leader. Yeah, I'm going to prove them wrong. But to prove them wrong, I've got to understand what it means. So I started, it was pre-Google and all of that. So I started buying books as you do and reading books about leadership. And the thing that came out, and it's what you said earlier, the thing that came out is to be a leader, you have to have a vision. You have to have a strategy. You're basically, if you don't have a strategy, you're more of a manager than a leader. Yeah. And in fact, if you're not careful, you won't even be a good manager anymore, because you'll be trying to be a leader without that central sort of difference, if that makes sense. So I realized very early on that strategy was the key to leadership in my eyes. And so that's how I adopted it to start with, and looked at how we were going to deliver that project and what differences that made, and how were we going to deliver the project twice as big, twice as fast, without doubling the stress on everybody and all of that. And we also had another key statistic that really frightened me, that was based on industry stats. We were going to have 5 people die on that construction project.
Wow.
And it was like, not on my watch. So what are we going to do different? How do we create a strategy around how we're going to do things differently, that we're going to stop that from happening? So all of that was the starting point of leadership. And I loved it. And which is why, again, coming back to your book for a moment, it was fascinating, because I always think of leadership, I start with looking, I mean, if there's a phrase I actually use on the podcast about everything I look at through the lens of strategy. But you don't. You look at everything through the lens of team and people. Yeah. So it's a different perspective, and I found that great. So that's where my fascination is. But I also, I mean, I don't call myself a management consultant. I call myself a leadership consultant. And the reason I do that is because I say to people, I'm not going to do it for you. I'm going to help you to create a strategy and a business plan and grow as leaders. But I'm here to help you be a leader. I'm not here to help you be a manager. I'm not here to basically tell you how you do it. But what I can do is help shape you into being a leader. And the starting point for me is forming that strategy.
And let's face it, the world needs them. We need leaders.
So that's kind of, an answer to your question. That's where it kicked off. So yeah, I'm fascinated by strategy in all sorts of sense. But I see strategy everywhere now, and half the time when there isn't any, I kind of create one in my head. Oh, they must be doing this because of, and then you realise later actually they're not.
They haven't got a plan.
They haven't got a plan at all. There is no rhyme or reason. It's just you're able to piece together, and sometimes the best strategies are actually ones you piece together after the event. You can actually create a theme and a story around a set of circumstances that were not that connected. But when you're trying to take people forward, you make that connect, and actually starts driving your thinking. Does this make sense? It drives your thinking in a way.
I'm somebody who joins dots.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's exactly that. Yeah. And then once you do that, you then suddenly see the picture, which you couldn't see when and the dots weren't necessary. I mean, it's like the constellations, isn't it? they don't really look like a plough or whatever.
No, until somebody draws the lines.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that's kind of what you're doing, isn't it?
So one thing that I'd really like to just suggest to you, your listeners, your viewers, is what you saw differently in my leadership approach is something that you a lot of people will also see if they start expanding the authors that they read. And what I mean specifically is women authors. And the reason why I can be really clear about this is when I was starting out in my leadership journey, the only books that were out there were strategy leadership books written by men. And now we have a lot more that are written by women, and they literally just show, oh, there's these elements to leadership as well. And actually, we need the masculine and we need the feminine. You put them together, you've got a genius. And so I absolutely recommend everybody read both men and women authors of leadership and strategy because it's so insightful.
Okay, well, we'll come back to that in a moment because I not like to set homework at the end of, and maybe that could be part of the homework. So anything else you'd like to ask me before we kind of wrap up?
No, I think you've answered my question.
Okay,
Thank
good.
you.
So would you like to just give some actionable tips that maybe could help our viewers and listeners?
Buy my book.
Yeah, obviously.
Because it's all in there. So my personal leadership journey, I had great people around me. So I had great coaches, I had great mentors, but I also observed a lot and I looked at what was getting results, but also what wasn't getting results. And so a lot of people think that on their leadership journey, they need to be the best or they need to have all the answers. Actually going into it with, I don't have all the answers and I'm really curious is going to get you really far ahead really quickly. Also, wisdom is incredibly important for anybody going into leadership. You have to have an air of discernment. And so therefore, the biggest tip that I can give to anybody is slow down. And it's true though.
It is true, yeah.
Most of your best thinking will be done when you are sat on the toilet, you're looking at a view, you're reading or listening to something when you've slowed down.
Cutting the grass for me.
Yeah, there you go.
Cutting the grass is when I get my best ideas.
Yeah,
it's amazing,
because you're
isn't it?
slowing
Doing
down.
something different.
And so if leaders, and this is the homework I usually give my leaders, is you need to have at least 20 minutes every day where you do nothing. You turn your phone off, you look out the window, you go outside, do something, because once your brain processes everything that's been going on, that's when you get your best thinking. Yeah. So slow down, people.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a film, Men in Black 3, and Men in Black 3 isn't actually that good a film in my opinion, but there's a great scene in it where two of the characters are sat there chatting and they've got an issue to resolve, and Will Smith's character is all getting out there and wants to solve it, and the other character is saying, we're just going to eat some pie. Let's just sit here and eat some pie. And he's going, we haven't got time for pie. We've got to get out. And he goes, no, we're going to find time and we're just going to eat some apple pie. And he makes Will Smith sit there and they eat the apple. And halfway between eating the apple pie and just chatting about something else entirely,
they get it.
They get Will Smith gets the inspiration for solving it. And to be honest, that's so true in life in my view. And I play that clip to some of my clients when we're talking about this, just to show the point about how doing something different can be the best way to solve a problem, not focused all the time.
Yeah, the mantra I always use for in those situations is we need to slow down to speed up.
Exactly, absolutely right. Okay, so yeah, some really good tips there. So that's great. So I mentioned it earlier that I always like to finish with some homework. Set the viewers and listeners something to do after the podcast, and I think you maybe touched upon your homework for the viewers. So back to you about the widening the books and what people should look at.
So as I was going on my own leadership journey, all the books that I was reading, all the sources, they were all written by men from a time when mainly it was men in leadership or in the workplaces. And so when I started to see more female writers about leadership or work or teams, and I started to see what was important to them and their style and their insights, my mind was blown. And so now I put the best of the masculine and the feminine leadership together.
And are there any books you could recommend?
Other than my book.
Obviously the best one.
Yeah.
And then after that,
there's a really good book called Multipliers.
Yeah.
I can't remember the woman's
Well, if you
name.
let me know afterwards, then I can put it. We'll Brilliant. Put it in the.
So yeah, Multipliers, amazing book, made me think very differently. And I will say one of the books that really changed my thinking was Sheryl Sandberg's book called Lean In. So I will. Yeah, get you that other name.
Yeah, give us the names of the books or the authors rather. We'll put it in the description below. On the YouTube channel, I'm looking over at Toby at the moment. On the YouTube channel, we normally put some graphics up where appropriate, so we can put images of the book and things, and that will help. So there's your homework for today. Go and look at some books by female writers with a different view maybe on leadership, and then come back and let me know what you've learned from that, how you're going to change, how that's going to make you think differently about leadership. Because there's no doubt, as I said earlier, that book has made me think differently. Right. And it's great because it's really important that we're always evolving and taking a different perspective, and things don't stay still, do they? No. They you know, I talked to a client recently about this, that the world is always changing. 2 years ago, none of us would have been talking about AI.
No.
Not even thought about it. 5 years ago, work from home would have been an entirely different discussion if somebody came and spoke to you about work from home. So the world is constantly changing, and it's really important to think differently and learn and be, we expect the business to continually improve. So why don't we expect ourselves to continually improve with it?
Amen to that.
So there you go. So thanks very much for joining us. I've really found it very interesting and fun. It's been great.
Me too.
So hopefully you've enjoyed it as well. Come and join me again next time for our next podcast, which I'm calling "But People Are Not Your Greatest Asset." I'll see you then. Cheers.